And I didn't need to tell you because she tells you. Hello, Rebecca. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. And to kick us off tonight, I am going to have us all share who we are, where we're from, and one reason why we were excited about joining tonight. And it'd be great if you shared if you've read the book or not read the book. And forgive me, I have ink all over my hands. So if I look messy, it's just because I had a pen explode on me this morning. Lovely way to start the day. But so I'm just gonna call on folks in kind of the order I see you showing up on my screen. Linda, can we start with you? Oh, you are on mute.
I said, I'm just eating my dinner right now, salad, but Judy, I'm actually Linda, significant other of Jay Marshall.
Oh, interesting. Great.
Yeah. Oh, maybe I wasn't supposed to say that. So kind of
Okay. Nobody else knows who Jay Marshall is anyway, except
Okay,
me.
I just said Jay. Anyway, but I just was informed about it like a day ago. So I'm in the camp that I didn't read it, but I have a real interest in the subject matter. Having a mother that's 89 years old and is a force to be reckoned with, a real singular being. So I'm always interested in other people's experiences.
And Linda, where are you from?
Oh, sorry, I'm in Manhattan.
Excellent.
And I also do know Lido Beach, Judy. I spent a lot of time there a couple of summers. So
It's a great place to be in the summer, right?
Beach there that's only exclusive, for people that live in Lido Beach. It's nice.
Oh, right.
Yeah, that's the area that I live in. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there's that cute little like seafood, like it's almost like you're in like Cape Cod or something, that little place right next to Lido, and that great seafood restaurant.
Yes.
So in just in the sake of time, I'm going to go around and I'm going to have everyone share who they are, where they're from, and one reason why they wanted to be on this evening. And let's try to just keep it to about 30 seconds or so that we can make sure that we spend a lot of time discussing the book. I want us all to get to know each other a little bit, but I want to make sure we save the hour for discussing the book. So Amanda, could you go next?
Sure. I am actually located pretty close to Alicia. I am in Sophia, North Carolina, which is about half an hour south of you. I think you're in Greensboro, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was interested in the book because my friend Angela had told me that it was a very interesting book just because of the way that she knows our moms. So I was very interested in just being able to get a little background. I have not finished the book yet, but I'm very interested in being able to learn a little bit more about it.
Can't promise no spoilers, y'all. Just for the record, can't promise no spoilers. Shannon, can you go next?
Yes, I'm Shannon Lutmer, and I'm from Tyler, Texas, which is East Texas. So it's the Piney Woods. And I was interested in it. Somebody that I was reading had mentioned about it, and that was the second time I'd heard about it. And so I thought, that sounds good. And I come from a family of 8 kids, and I was in the middle, and my mom didn't really appreciate girls. She liked the 5 boys. But more importantly, I was thinking that maybe it's something, because there are things that I didn't like when I was raising my kids. And I thought maybe they might like it. So that's one of the other reasons that I'm interested in it. Excellent. And I have not read it yet.
Thank you. Beth, will you go next?
I'd be happy to go next. Hi, my name is Beth Hijack. I am in Riceville Beach, North Carolina. And it's very hard. I haven't read the book, that I will attend anything that Alicia puts together because it's always fabulous. And I'm always going to learn something amazing. And I have come from a long line of dominant matriarchs. And so I'm curious to see what I can learn from this conversation. And reading your book, because my mother's at an age of 78. And it's an interesting space to start setting boundaries with her and watching her response and pivoting as I set the boundaries of love with her. So I am very excited to be with you all tonight and to learn more about this wonderful book.
Excellent. Thank you. Angela.
I'm Angela Snap, and I am northeast of Kansas City, Missouri. I have read the book, could not wait to meet Judy because I loved the presentation of the book and how it helped me have more compassion towards my mother. So thank you.
Thank you, Angela. Vivi, will you go next? Genevieve.
Sorry, I'm Genevieve. I'm in Greensboro, North Carolina. I will echo Beth's sentiments about any event Alicia does. They're always fabulous and you always have takeaways. I have read the book. I've read almost 30 books this year and I hadn't quite decided, but it may be the best book I've read this year.
Oh,
If it's not, it's in the top 2. And the only reason I haven't made that decision is because I finished it last Sunday and I want to put some distance between when I finished it and saying, okay, that was the best book, but it probably is the best book I've read this year.
Thank you. Rebecca.
So I'm Rebecca and I live just north of Greensboro, North Carolina. And I am halfway finished with the book. It came Friday and I started it yesterday. So I am like forgetting everything else I need to do because I'm just really loving this. Judy, I listened to the podcast with Alicia and I'm in her raw group. I'm one of the women in her morning group, and she's raved about this book since you read it. So I was really interested in coming tonight because of that. So thanks.
Thanks, Rebecca. Erin, will you go next?
I'm Erin and I'm in Denver. I moved here from Greensboro about 2 years ago. And I'm excited about this book. I've read about 25% of it. But the reason why I really was drawn to it was an interesting relationship that I have with my mother, right? And because as I was growing up, I lost 2 siblings. So that significantly altered the, mothering that I received. And then now kind of starting to process all of that. And then thinking about how I'm mothering my 3 girls and my son too, but my girls so that they can go on to mother as well. So thank you for having this.
Thank you, Erin. Anne, will you go next?
Sure, I'm Anne and I live in Greensboro and I'm also a member of Alicia's Raw group and pretty much love anything that Alicia does. I was really interested in this book. I just started reading it Friday, but I'm about 2/3 into it and love it. Just love it, Judy. It's wonderful. I was really interested in reading this because like almost everybody in this call, I have an interesting and complicated relationship with my mother, who's 87, and I just spent a month with her recently. And I have 2 daughters, and I know our relationships are complicated as well. And so I'm loving reading this. It's helping.
Thank you. Ashley.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ashley Madden. I live in Greensboro, North Carolina. I have finished the book. When I got the email about this book suggestion, there was part of me that was like, you have to read this right away. And there was part of me that felt some trepidation about it because I wasn't sure how it was going to make me feel. But I really, really enjoyed it. Like the other people said, I lived with my mother for 6 weeks during COVID last year, during shutdown. Interestingly, while my father, who I also have sort of a complicated relationship, was dying of Parkinson's and Lewy body dementia, for those of you who have read the book. So it really hit home for me, not only on the complexities of the parental relationship, but also the challenging aspect of taking care of an aging parent through the process of their end of their life. So as difficult as it was for me to read, since that just happened last year, it was also really, really meaningful. So thank you.
Kayla, is that how I pronounce your name?
Keela. Hi.
Kayla. Hi.
Hi, everyone. My name's Keela. I'm in Dallas, Texas. I just found out about the Zoom an hour ago. So here I am. These last couple of months, I've been on a healing journey. And through that journey, I am in a better place, but it seems to be that my relationship with my mom has just always ebbed and flowed. And it's just still that there's some things there still while I've been on this journey. So yeah, and the book just, I read a quick snippet of it on Amazon and it just grabbed my attention.
Thank you. Amy, last but not least.
Hi, sorry, I joined a little late. I guess we're just saying who we are, where we live, and
why we wanted to come tonight.
Okay, thank you. So I'm Amy Benosi. I live in Northern Virginia, just minutes outside of Washington, D.C. And I too am a member of the Alicia fan club and participate in Raw and anything else she puts out because it's always amazing. I have finished the book. I actually wanted to go back. I didn't get a chance, but I wanted to go back. If you can see, I have a lot of dog-eared pages, but I did not get to go back yet. But I want to. I loved this book. I would agree with Genevieve. I'm an avid reader, and I think this was one of my favorites. Is one of my favorites. I'm a big memoir reader, and Judy, I just love the way that you write. The descriptive writing, as a writer myself, was like just so powerful, and the storytelling was incredible. And I have been on a spiritual journey for a number of years here, and setting boundaries with both of my parents is a large portion of that. But as somebody else said, I don't remember who, it also really made me, for the first time, really think about the fact that my mom was not born a mom, that she was a person in a life before I knew her. And it's encouraged a lot of good conversations between the two of us, and also just me thinking about some of the traumas that she suffered, and what made her a mom. And yeah, I think she listened to the podcast we both did, and I think she's going to be reading it as well. So thank you for this incredible book.
Dear Judy, I want to open the floor to you now to share or reflect back anything you want on what was said before we open it up for questions and reflections.
Well, I am so touched to be here and so touched to hear what you're all saying, because I wrote this book with the hope that it would resonate with a lot of people. And hearing all your unique experiences, and yet the desire to make peace with our mothers. I mean, mothering is one of just the hardest jobs in the world. And it sounds like those of you on the call are trying to figure out how the relationship with your mother has impacted you and how it's impacted your mothering, and how we can do things differently, and if we can do things differently, and if we want to do things differently. And these are all still open-ended questions, you know. Probably my biggest regret is that the book is done, because I have been working on this book for decades. I have been rewriting these chapters. I put them I mean, I'd say 6 years ago, took all the chapters and I put them on the floor of my living room. And there were more that didn't make it into this book. And I said, how am I going to make a story out of this? What is the story? What is the story? And it wasn't until I was almost done that I understood the story was the way I thought of my mom in the beginning and I thought of her at the end. It actually makes me cry to even say this, that I went through my life feeling that my mother was this superficial woman who just had this, what I sometimes call toxic optimism. You know, like everything's going to be fine. You're fine. I'm fine. Don't worry. It'll all work out. And it took me the whole book of writing it and my whole life to understand it's good she had that attitude, because life is really hard. And she had things that were hard in her life that I couldn't have understood when I was just her daughter. And I couldn't possibly have imagined what it would be like to get pregnant at 18, marry your then boyfriend, not go to college, move to some kind of factory town where your husband had a job and who knew what you were going to do, and then have a miscarriage. And then pull yourself together and make your life work. And that was just the beginning, right?
Yeah.
So I know a lot of you didn't read it and I don't want to ruin it, but I hope you're hearing from the others that I couldn't ruin it because all of our lives are collages. You know, we have these different chapters. And sometimes even now we look back and you think about what you were doing 10, 15 years ago. And it's hard to understand that that is part of who you were, even if that was stupid you hitchhiking in somewhere or other, like really risking your life, or you were with the wrong guy, or you were with no guy, or you were with the wrong person. And what did you see in that person anyway? And who knows? But anyway, so it's been a lifetime challenge writing this book. In between, I wrote 2 other books because I love writing. And I also feel just like you, Alicia, and some of you mentioned, writing is really healing. When my life slides down, if I just say to myself, Judy, 10 minutes, start writing, and start writing by saying, I don't know what to write. I don't know what to write. And you're going to know what to write. And then 10 minutes becomes more than 10 minutes. So it's a great pleasure to be here. And I am happy to talk. I'm happy to answer questions. I really wrote this book. This is going to make me cry as a ritual of mourning. I wrote this book after my mother died, and until maybe 2 or 3 years ago, the book started that I heard that she was it started with me at her deathbed, having all these flashbacks. But I went to one person, to many different people, mentors, coaches, who knows who, friends. And who would want to read this story? And they said, no, the most interesting part of it is that you were a psychologist, that you specialized in mother-daughter relationship, and you had unfinished business with your own mother. That's really the most important part. Not that you sat with your mother as she was dying, which is also a universal experience, but your unique experience was you became an expert in something that you had unfinished business and unresolved issues with. And I now have a new catchy phrase. It's called research. When you talk to a psychologist, research is always me search. Whatever a psychologist is researching, it's because they have something in their own life. And it has nothing to do with being a psychologist, that we're all living with loose threads. Our lives are a quilt and we have so many loose threads. And we're always trying to see, how does this story fit together?
Judy, that's profound. I'm so grateful that you're here. and that you're sharing your time so generously with us this evening. And for those of you that have not been to a Yoke and Abundance book club before, we're rather informal. The most important thing is that we're just cognizant of the time piece of it, because we have an hour. And we can go past an hour, but I promised Judy just an hour. So I want to make sure that we have the questions for Judy within that from now till 8 o'clock. And what I would love for us to do is open it up kind of for questions that we might have around areas in the book that, or comments, like something that struck you, something that stood out to you, something that was important. And it is informal, so you don't have to raise your hand. You can jump in, and if I see that we've got a lot at once, I'll kind of moderate, but I want you to feel free to jump in. And I'll call on you if we get quiet.
So I don't really have a lot of questions, but I just want to share that the very first exercise where you were to find a picture of your mother and imagine how she was feeling or what she was doing at the very, very first of the book. Sorry to spoil it for you guys if you haven't read it, but that was like the most hard but rewarding exercise for me. And I will be honest, like some of the other exercises further in the book, I decided to do those later because it was way too emotional for me as I read through the book. But I really liked that, and I appreciate how open and honest you were. I cannot even believe you're on the screen here.
I love those exercises. So I invented the first and last exercise in the book in the 90s. And I used to do mother-daughter workshops and I think now I should really do them again, because, it's incredible that I wrote the book and still there are issues that float through my mind. I was just talking to somebody today, someone called me, a woman who was a secretary for me 25 years ago, called and said, I bought the book, I read the book, I thought I knew you, but no, now I know more about you. Anyway, and she's talking to me about the book, and she said to me, you hosted your mother's second wedding in your apartment? Why? And I said, that's like an unanswered question. I didn't explain it in the book, but I had like another whole book that got edited out of that book. And so in another chapter that didn't get in that book, I asked myself that question, which of course I asked myself that question many times over the many years that followed.
Let me put on my earbuds.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, Judy.
And that's all right. And I wondered, did I do that because I loved my mother, because my father had just died, because I was afraid if she could dump my father, she could dump me. Like maybe I didn't have, somebody used the word boundaries. And no, I didn't have the boundary. I didn't even have the awareness to think, what? You're asking me to host your wedding in my apartment with this backstory that I am so unlucky to know, that you could have kept your mouth shut and I didn't have to know it, that you had such poor judgment, that you had to share your biggest secrets with me. I was your mourning daughter, but I didn't say any of that to her then, and that's not in the book. So you see, there's still we all have questions about why we did what we did when we did it. Like why you married that person or why you didn't marry that person, or it's endless, right? So it's a wonderful profession being a psychologist because I get to listen to stories all day in my office. And even here in this group, I get to listen to people's stories, and other people's stories are a window on ourselves. You know, we listen to a story and we think about ourselves. Really, she did that. I would never do that. You know, or why didn't I ever do that? She just dropped out of college and went and did her own thing for 2 years. And look at her now. She's 45 years old and very successful. She didn't follow the parents' instructions that said stay in college. She did her own thing. Good for her. Why didn't I do that? So we learn things every day, you know. Therapists learn a lot. It's a great profession.
I'm curious, by a show of hands of those of you that read the book, in that first exercise of thinking about the picture, who in your mind found a picture immediately of your mom? And like, yeah, I think I was like, in my head, a picture came to mind. But it also made me want to go through past pictures. You know, that box of the black and white photos where, you know, or in my case, multiple black and white boxes of photos, and like find just the right one to kind of put out, you know.
I mean, even an interesting exercise would be if you think about a photo of your mother that's in your house today. After all, think of how many people here have a photo of their mother in their house today. Let me see. So almost, well, some people I can't tell because they don't have, I'm seeing a picture of them instead of, but in any event. And so how did that picture get selected? Did you, you must have selected it, whether you actually realize you selected it or not, right? Because we know when we don't like pictures, we rip them up, right? So we wouldn't put a picture of ourselves up in our house that we didn't like. That would be deleted. So think of a picture that you have in your house of your mother, and what does that picture say to you about your mother? And what does it say to you about who she was at that time, or who you were? Who else is in the picture with her? And what are the fantasies we have about our mothers? You know, for example, my mother told me a story that she eloped. And that's the story I grew up with until I got much older. And I had a fantasy of this romantic young couple eloping. How fabulous. And it wasn't until I got much older and I understood that eloping when you're pregnant is really different than eloping when you're not pregnant, right? Right.
Mm.
Yeah.
I have a quick question, and I'm approaching this from back end. So I know my mother's secrets. I've been her secret keeper. I've been her soldier. I've been her caretaker from as young as I can remember. And it's an interesting part. About 3 years ago, I started stepping into my own skin and setting boundaries. I love my mother. I understand her trauma. I understand the environment she grew up in that shaped her, and the way that the world denied her opportunities, coming from a very abusive family full of alcoholism and other things. And so this space I'm in now, I have tremendous compassion for my mom. I mean, as a human being separate from my parent, but the interesting space of what now? What now when my mom is still operating in that old framework and asking me, what happened to my daughter? Where did my daughter go? And I'm like, I'm still here. So I don't know if the book speaks to it, but if it does, I'd love to hear. What do you think?
Well, you're asking a really great question. What happens when we change?
Yeah.
What happens when we change and we no longer want to play by the same rules?
Mm-hmm.
And how can we negotiate that in a way that we feel good about ourselves? I mean, since we're not teenagers now, so we can't just shout at our mothers and slam the door, you know? I mean, so how do we say, you know, things have changed in my life and I need more privacy, or I need not to be in charge of your finances, or I do need to take over your finances because you're making a mess of your life. And if you make a mess of this part of your life, there are going to be heavy consequences for the rest of the family for the next couple of decades. So please put me on your bank account. You know, I mean, every person in this room has a different need. So a need might be to overstep a boundary and say, Mom, look what you just did. Let me take over paying your bills.
Mhm.
A need might be, Mom, I mean, somebody spoke to me and they said to me, my mother calls me 8 times a day. I said, 8 times a day, what does she speak about? They said, anything that goes wrong in her life. If a check bounces, she calls me. If the super doesn't come to remove the porch furniture, she calls me. If the car mechanic doesn't call her back at the time he said he would, she calls me. I said, oh, well, like, how did, you know, a question which I wouldn't ask exactly is, how did you get yourself in this position? Do you ever say, Mom, I'm in a meeting, or Mom, I'm tied up, or I'll call you back at 4 o'clock? No, I couldn't do that. She couldn't survive. But of course, we know the mom could survive. She just would be disappointed. The mom would have to adjust to the fact that her daughter is no longer to be there in the same way. So Beth, is this on target or not exactly? Wait,
Yes,
you're on mute.
yes, and what you just reminded me is, I know I've evolved and I know that my mom hasn't kept pace with me, but that point of tension for me within this relationship is still that little girl. There's
Yeah.
still that little girl. And it's like, man, I thought I had worked that out. But there's still that part of me that adores this dynamic woman who's beautiful and intelligent and wants to fight for the things that she would for her, right? And at the same time, knowing I don't want to end up being Grey Gardens with her, the reboot. But it's a good piece for me to reflect on, is where my tension is lying. And I do have tremendous compassion for her.
Well, you see, in a way, you're lucky because you have compassion and you can say, Mom, I love you so much, but I can't be there. I just decided, and it doesn't have to be that you're working. It can be, I decided I really want to write a book. And if I don't spend 4 hours a day writing, there's not going to be a book. So I want to be there for you, but some of these things are going to have to wait till my writing period is over. I'm not answering my phone anymore between X and Y, you know? I mean, it's actually been a great thing being a therapist, because everybody knows therapists don't answer the phone during the hours they're working. It's not like other people who have different kinds of jobs. So I feel like I'm never going to retire because it's a great out for me. I'm working.
I love that.
I think I should reconsider my career path then.
No, you just have to set it. You're right, exactly. But for all of us to set up a thing, you know, like time that's ours, it's sacred, you know, and I don't want to be interrupted. And most people's emergencies are really not emergencies. And we've gotten ourselves in situations that we think we have to respond. We have to rethink all this. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a 2-part question.
I just want to say one thing. I mean, this is the same with everybody in our life. Like, for example, I'm in the middle of doing something and we got a new printer and my husband says to me, do you know how we changed the toner? Of course, I don't know how you change the toner. It's a new printer. How am I supposed to know how you, and not only that, I'm busy, you know, like, right. I mean, it's these things come up every single day of our lives. We have to honestly be so conscious of our own time and protecting our own time, even from people we love, and even from things that have to be addressed. Anyway, I'm sorry. You were going to say something.
Yeah,
Amy.
Thank you for actually adding that on, because I think that's something we do talk about quite a bit in Raw, is our role as women, and sometimes how that has affected those that or our supposed role in some of these generational blessings and curses. So my question is somewhat two-part. As I said, I have, really started creating healthier boundaries for myself with both of my parents. It's not just my mom. So my question with that, the first part is that they will in the moment sound like those boundaries are okay, but then go on to not necessarily act as if, and they will push the boundaries much like my children might. And the second, so how to manage that dynamic. And then the second part is in reading, as I mentioned, I really gained a lot of that compassion for my mom that I may not have had so much before. And so I'm curious how to balance. I'm finding myself in a space where when I'm trying to create boundaries, I then feel bad.
I don't know if it's that we're women, that we feel bad when we create new boundaries. That, whether I do feel like I have this in my head, that if I sort of start by saying, I'll have time in an hour to see what we do about the printer, but I can't do that now. I feel like I almost have to give us something in order to take us something. You know what I mean? But and also dealing with a husband is very different than dealing with an elderly parent who might be really feeling helpless. And so how to have it in your mind and in your heart, I really love you. I'm really going to be here for you. You really are going to be able to count on me for the big stuff. But for the little stuff, I just can't turn my whole life over. I'm really not 100% accessible. Just to know that yourself. That sounds like that would be a harsh thing to say to somebody. We'd have to ask ourselves why. Who is 100% accessible for you? Whoever was. If you have a problem, you're lucky if you have a few friends, because maybe you can get one on the phone. But everybody's not just sitting there like with endless time. So how do we get into that role? And I guess what I was aware of in writing this book was just my own tenacious love of my mother, even though she had done many things that completely stressed me out. And I felt were insensitive, were selfish, were thoughtless, and that she lacked attunement and basics in, family dynamics and a whole bunch of things. And yet I still loved her, and I still wanted her approval. And I still had all kinds of rituals with her, like shopping. Like we could go shopping together, and that was a way of just being bonded. Browsing around a department store and trying on sweaters that we didn't need to buy. And I have a patient, and she and her mother, they get their nails done together, and that's a really good thing. People are always saying, so how do people create bonds? A bond can be getting your nails done, right? A bond can be, my mother would come to my house and she loved to garden. And that was nice. That was really helpful, and she actually got me into it. And in the beginning of the pandemic, I joined a writing group. And I guess the pandemic started in March. We should probably all have that date fixed in our mind, like March 13th. Was that right? And in April, and it was so horrible for all of us. But then I remember we had a sunny day in April, and I went out and I bought pansies. And I planted them, and I thought of my mother. That makes me practically cry. And I thought, like, I've imbibed her. I have imbibed my mother. That I bought these pansies, purple pansies, and I wrote this poem. It was the best thing I wrote in the whole group. Planting purple pansies in the pandemic. I thought about my mother. And I just played with those words over and over again, and I understood something just more profound than ever about how things that rooted her and grounded her, she had passed on to me. And that when I was afraid to go into any supermarkets, no thank you, I still did get in my car and I went to the nursery because it was all outdoors. And I felt that was a great thing to do. And I felt like, oh, if my mother were here and I could tell her that, she just would think I was the smartest person ever. So it is a funny thing that we can hold such complicated feelings, the positive and the negative. You know I said on Alicia on the podcast, our mothers are our first lovers and our first heartbreaks. They gave us love, even if it certainly was imperfect. But if you were lucky enough to have a mother who wanted you and who nuzzled you and nuzzled you and cuddled you and loved you and did any of this any of the time, that is what we needed. When we're infants, we are desperate for love and protection, and that bond is really deep. And even when that person disappoints us, later on, we still have that earlier tie, that bond. Anyway, those purple pansies, I haven't thought about them since, for a year and a half now, practically. So what was the question again?
I think you addressed part of it in the boundary setting piece.
Yeah,
the other challenge
was, I think if we change it also and think, how can I really be respectful to myself? Like, I don't have to be available all the time.
Yeah.
I don't have to be available all the time. I remember there was a stage in my life where I used to pick my husband up at a train station, and I would always call my mother in the car because this was really convenient for me. And I also knew it gave her, this is right, I guess, in the beginning of Parkinson's. And it gave her like Wednesdays out. And then I started leaving early because otherwise I realized I was just always rushing her. And she always felt rushed. And it just became a nice thing that I left early, that I left 15 minutes early. This is before she had bad Parkinson's and we could still have conversations. And it just was it was good for me too, to feel like I am doing this. I'm doing a lot of things. I did take over my mother's checkbooks and all that stuff. And it was okay. It was important. It just was my job. I was the designated daughter. That's another book. Every family has at least one designated daughter, and I don't know how many people here. Yeah. All right. Well, that makes five of us out of like 13 people. Maybe the designated daughters are the ones who are really trying to unravel the enigma of the bond, the responsibility, the love, the difficulty setting boundaries. And yet you don't want to feel like you're just a mean person, because you're not. You're really filled with love, and you're filled with a lot of compassion. If you have as we watch our parents get old and frail and feeble and not well, and just not be able to even pay a bill, that, do things that they really once could do. It's really challenging, right? But you're helping me even think about it, that I think knowing you feel loving in your heart, and you're setting a boundary, and not but, and somebody just did that before. I think it might have been you, Beth. Somebody, the and. I love you, and I have to let you know. I love you, and I have to let you know that blah, blah, blah. Linda, unmute yourself.
I'm on Zoom all day. I mean,
ditto.
Sounds a bit like my mother, who's 89, but she's such a combination of being a very narcissistic personality, right? But also extremely loving, right? So
Yes.
This person, very, very, very extreme in 89. The only thing that has deteriorated in her is her body. Like, how does this body not like keeping up with her mind that is like a 30-year-old person. So there's always been this kind of like approach avoidance, and I'm just as bad as hers in terms of setting boundaries, because I happen to be her daughter, and I know the narcissistic part of her that other people that socialize with her don't see that. But she's like a person that everyone is drawn to, but they don't see the other side that I see. So I'm just as complicit in not setting boundaries as she is, because she's so damn smart. She's like so full of advice and wisdom on so many different levels, right? And so, it's like complicated because, it's like there's an acceptance. First of all, you have to accept your mother because you don't have a choice. Like, this is it, right? But it's like, I spent, this was a couple of months ago, I spent 10 days with her in Florida. She invited me. She doesn't live in Florida. She lives in the city. And it was like, I was all prepared to write, because I like to write, that I was going to write a memoir about every moment with my mother. Well, it ended up being the most disastrous 10 days that I ever spent. But then it was just, it was like, kind of like being in that setting, it brought out all the worst aspects of her, controlling me and her excessive like ability to have to socialize with everyone. And all of a sudden it just came into focus. Oh my God, this is what my whole life was like. I kind of knew it, but I never really saw it in this concentrated form. So like those dynamics are there because I think that we're drawn to those mothers that have all those sides to them because they're very charismatic people. I mean, that's in my case, but you know what I'm saying? And unfortunately, I haven't been able to read your book yet, which I will, but there's many, many layers. We all have different layers, but when you have these exceptional people and, we all kind of idealize our mothers in some ways, we hate them, we idolize them, but mine is very, very extreme. So it's like, I just was like, oh my God, on the 8th day of being with her in this hotel. And she said to me, this is the worst vacation I ever. And I looked at her and it was like, I can still cry over this. I said, let's make amends. And I hugged her. And like, I said, like, what's the point? It's like, I have to, it's that acceptance, but keeping our mother's story to ourselves. Like, we really know our mothers better than anyone, right? Who could have and you can't have a more, I don't think if you have a relationship with your mother, nothing can be more intimate, right? And
Well, I think this also, like the book starts with a quote, two different people. And one of the quotes, let me just read it, is, I could summarize it, but I'll read it. We are taught to believe that pent-up hostility is dangerous, and yet the real tragedy is pent-up love. And maybe we all have of this primitive love and yearning and longing, I mean, for our mothers that gets triggered in all different kinds of situations. Another imagery that I love in my mother-daughter workshop is, all right, so we'll do it right now. So everybody imagine that you're a baby in a crib. See yourself in a crib. And imagine you've pulled yourself up on the bars and suddenly the door of your room creaks and you know who's going to walk in. It's mom. Notice what you feel like as you imagine yourself as the baby in the crib holding onto these bars and you're about to see your mom. What kind of expression do you think she'll have on her face? And how do you feel as you imagine her coming over to the crib? Because you've been in this crib, you got up from your nap like an hour ago and you really want to get out and start moving around. What's going on inside of you as you imagine your mother coming over to the crib? So I'll tell you what goes on for me, but first somebody else respond. What did that bring anything up for you, or was it jarring, or was it what?
Excitement. I mean, I think that's how I imagine I would have felt.
Yes, I mean, when anybody else, any other word come up for anybody?
Happy.
Agenda.
I would feel nurtured, like nurturing is, I'm going to be nurtured soon. I'm going to be taken care of. I'd feel relief.
What we want as infants. So that was, you're a baby pulling yourself up, you're under a year old, and what we want is security and protection and nurturance and physical contact. There's no words. We don't talk. We don't think in phrases. We just think mommy, 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 mommy. Mommy, mommy, mommy. If you just close your eyes and hear my voice saying mommy, 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 it can bring all of us back to a time when our very being was necessitated on mommy being there. And I think it's just a part of human nature. A woman in a group I run once said, "This must be insane. I'm a grown woman. I have 3 children. I go home to my mother's house. When I get in that bathtub and I take a bath, I want my mother to whisk my children away, and I want to have time to just lay in the bathtub by myself. I want her to still take care of me. I want her to protect me from these 3 children who are always asking, needing, wanting, talking. I want her to give me that special time and space that I'm never going to get in my life again. Or when I get it, when they finally go to college, I'll be in another phase." Anyway,
Judy,
but that primitive bond is so intense. Yes, Alicia.
I'm curious if you were overwhelmed at the responses that you're getting for this book. And I have to imagine you're getting a lot of outpouring from this. And I'm wondering if you anticipated it or if it surprised you.
It moves me. It does surprise me. I didn't know. I wrote 2 other books, but they weren't personal like this book. This is really a very personal book. So, I mean, it's very moving. It's people connecting, people writing me, telling me stories about their relationship with their mother, and me. It's very validating. It's very validating.
Yeah, I want to know the next time you're doing a mother-daughter
Oh,
workshop.
well, maybe you and I'll arrange one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so right now I'm just going to different book clubs and going on podcasts and writing things, and it's a very rich experience.
Well, we're all benefiting, and we have time for about one more question. Will you raise your hand if you have a question about the book? Genevieve, you've been so quiet. I know there's something percolating back there. So, but anyone,
Okay.
Yeah, I knew you had one.
There's a paragraph on later in the book that kind of hit me. And kind of the precursor to that is I lost my dad at the beginning of the year. And these words of yours just kind of resonated. And I'm going to read this or part of it. It says, "Only later would I realize that I had to develop my own ways of escaping pain. Only later would I realize that just 6 months after my father's death, I enrolled in a PhD program. Certainly with an active toddler, I must have unconsciously known attending graduate school would keep me busy and might allow me to stave off the grief about the loss of my father," and so on and so on and so on. And that's me right now. I am doing things and having to do things to avoid that or fill that space or just, pick something. But that resonated very much. So thank you.
Well, you're very welcome. I think grieving, then I wrote more about my dad's death. Oh, that must be the chapter about my dad's death. And when I realized that I had never really grieved my father, because I was so mad at my mother because of her secret, which you'll have to read the book in order to know what it was. But I was so mad at my mother that I spent a lot of energy being mad at her rather than grieving my father. And I certainly had no role model for grieving my mother, who was now with another guy. And that's another thing. I wrote a book before this called Befriending Your Ex After Divorce, Making Life Better for You, Your Kids, and yes, your ex. And there's a whole chapter about grief, about how people get divorced and are so busy pulling their lives together that they never even really grieve the divorce. The amount of work involved in reorganizing your life is probably unexpected for almost everybody who ever gets divorced. Just everything, money, work, children, custody, this person who you used to be married to, now you have to be co-parents with. And it's hard to actually face that you've buried a dream. You got married and you had a dream that the marriage was going to work. And a divorce is a death knell. It didn't work. But anyway, so I had a mother who was not good at grieving. And I didn't even know I didn't know what you were supposed to do, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
No one really said to me, let's just take a walk on the beach and think about Dad. Let's think about how much Dad would have loved walking on the beach in this hot weather, cold weather, cloudy day, sunny day. Yeah.
Well, Judy, I'm so grateful that you came and shared so much of yourself. I'm so grateful that you wrote your book. And for those of you that haven't yet, please go buy the book. Listen to the podcast. I will drop that episode in the chat box. Again, I did it at the beginning, but I'm going to do it now. And, if you like the podcast episode, please share it with friends. Let them know about the podcast, let them know about the book. Just spread the word, because this is something that I think that should be required reading for mothers and daughters alike.
Oh my God, I'm so blessed to have met you. I mean, you just are so much fun to do these things with. And I feel like we're just on the same wavelength. It's really great. So I look forward to more. We never know what's going to happen next in life. It's been great meeting all of you. Maybe Alicia and I will organize a mother-daughter one day, something or other. We'll see. We've actually enjoyed meeting each other through this whole Zoom life that we now all have.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy, right?
Absolutely. And I just want to extend, for those of you that are kind of new to the Yoke and Abundance family here, so book clubs, they used to happen once a month, and that's quite a bit to keep up with. So now they kind of happen quarterly. When there's a book that comes up that I feel really passionate about, I make it our book club book. Every now and then the author is generous, like Judy, and comes on and shares their time with us. Sometimes it's not, sometimes it's just us speaking. But we also have a morning group. We meet every Monday through Friday. There's two groups, either a 7:45 to 8:45 or a 9 to 10. And we spend 30 minutes writing our morning pages together. So, and you can write morning pages, you can meditate, you could paint, you can really do whatever you want, but we all go quiet on Zoom for 25 minutes. And then we have 30 minutes to talk about what's coming up for us. It's not therapy. We don't give each other advice. We just share what's coming up spiritually, emotionally, and creatively in our lives, the good, the bad, the ugly. And so if you're not a part of Raw and would like to be, you can come visit, but you could also just join. So I highly recommend getting involved in the community. We're a really loving bunch, and we would love to have you. So yeah. For those of you that Yes.
One last thing, I want to ask everybody to go to my web, do two things. If you read and like the book, please write me an Amazon review. I am told that 100 reviews means you've hit something in the way they work, their algorithm, whatever that word means. And then my book will pop up when things like mothers and daughters go into a search bar. And go to my website because I do other things. I have a giveaway on there. I have a writing group that I run. So, and other things too. So that's it. And tell your friends to read the book. And I hope to see you all again at another event. Thank you so much again, Alicia. And I know we will be in touch. This was beautiful, beautiful time together. Really enjoyed it.
And
Thank
Judy,
you.
thank you. Have a great evening. For anyone who wants to stay on and continue discussing the book, I've got about 15 more minutes. We can chat a little bit longer, but otherwise, thank you so much for coming tonight. So anyone else have thoughts they want to share about the book? I see wheels turning. And y'all are welcome to come off mute. But isn't Judy amazing? Oh my God, that woman.
Yes, she's exactly what I expected her to be.
Her heart is so big and beautiful and loving and gracious, and
She makes me miss the city.
I love the way that I love the way she wrote this book. I'm not quite finished with it, but I've read quite enough of it to understand. I love the fact that, she kept giving us these interactions that she actually had in therapy sessions, which were so wonderful and rich. And then the aspect, then being vulnerable about where she was with herself and why these things were affecting her the way they were, and realizing the problems that she had accepting her own mother. I just thought that was a brilliant way to put that together, because I think we can all appreciate that, or I really can. I mean, there's so much that I love about my mother, and then there's all the stuff that drives me completely bonkers. And, I think what it is she gives at least I felt that I had permission to go ahead and say, yeah, this makes me crazy, and I can love her, and try to find that place in the middle. I don't know.
Yeah.
She's really good.
The main theme of the book being that making peace with your mother is really making peace with yourself.
Yeah.
I know we didn't really touch on that tonight, but that is the through theme of the book. And it's profound to me on so many levels, because anything I get upset with my mom about is really something I'm scared of developing, or something I feel like I see in myself. And until I find the way to make peace with that, I can't make peace with her. And that's really what it's about. And so that's really profound to me. This book was so beautiful and so difficult to get through. Like, there were times where I'd read it and just have to put it down for a little bit because it was so poignant.
Yeah, everything that you just said, Alicia. And then on top of that, having the relationships with two daughters, adult daughters, and thinking about like anything that comes up with my mother, there's a lot of that, what you just said, like how it affects me, but also like, oh, what am I carrying away from that relationship? Or what do I own? What's mine? And then how am I redoing that again in my relationship with my children? So it's that anguish that yeah.
It's a really interesting space to think about. She's made me think a lot about, and hearing you all speak, is that there's a seduction. There's a seduction piece around a child and I don't mean in a sexual way, but like with my mother, for example, with the place where I hit the boundaries the strongest is when I'm afraid of slipping, of losing that footing that I've had to speak my truth or hold my ground, and or not go down that slippery slope of getting sucked into her larger than life, and or in that cellular memory, you know, the way that she could light us all up with a phrase, good or bad, you know, because we were always seeking that approval, that attention. And it was a very strange space this summer when I was telling her about my divorce or my separation. And I went to hug her, and I really just wanted my mom to hold me, right? And I held on to her, and because I'm a hugger, I love a good hug. And she just held me, and I'm like, it dawned on me, I'm like, oh my gosh, she doesn't know how to hug. And I don't remember in all of my childhood that ever that safe space in her. I got it from her sister, but it blew open this space of compassion for me because she was abused. No one demonstrated her how to hug. She wasn't loved on. And there's that adult, it's a really interesting dance of how do you stay in the adult you, right? And not go down this slippery slope of that cellular memory of that child want or need. Because I understand intellectually, I've done the work, I continue to do the work. And at the same time, do we ever stop wanting that? Do you know that my brother said to me, he came up and helped me move, and he said, I just wanted one of them to say, good job. I just wanted to feel safe. Now, my mother, on the other side, gave me my love of New York City and art and gardening. And we would walk 80 blocks in New York City, right? And at the same time, there's all these layers, and I'm not really sure how do you do that dance? How do you do that dance between the 55-year-old woman and not slipping into the toxicity of an old dynamic you learned from childhood? It's mind-blowing. It's like, oh, this will entertain. Not, I don't mean this. I mean, this is more sarcastically to take my mind off my other personal little chaotic mess, but it's just, I wonder, are father and son's relationships this complicated? I mean, wow. Wow.
No, Beth, it's funny. What I will say about this is when she had us do the exercise. So, I was lucky. I had a dad that was just as much a caretaker as my mom was for all three of us kids. Like, there was no differentiator between who did the caring of the children. And that was something that she talked about on the podcast, but it was just not that way in my household. And I had a dad that was born in 54. So he wasn't like, he was young, but not that young. Right. And I was just lucky. So that was interesting when she was having us do that. Like, I was picturing my dad. That would have been the way more person coming in to pick me up in the crib than my mom.
That's who woke us up in the morning.
Yeah.
My mom was like, we don't want my mom. But there was that interesting moment when she did, because before there were 2 more children and a house to build, there is this something that she has. It's kind of like the other woman from New York said, there's something so charismatic about my mother. Right. And you're just drawn to her. And simultaneously, 4 children were cringe waiting for her to blow up on the other side of being charismatic. So my dad's a sweet man, but not much Yeah, he would, yeah, sorry, yeah.
Other thoughts, y'all?
These are the
Well,
best parties.
oh, go ahead.
No. I just given Alicia a compliment. I said she throws the best parties.
Thanks.
I agree with that. I was going to say, this may be, because when I finish it, this may be one of the rare books I read again. Because I've rarely, now actually, I've only done that once in my life. I've read something twice. If I, on purpose, I have read stuff twice by mistake, but it's one of the rare books because it was so good and hit so many spots.
Well, you know, memoir is my favorite genre. So as a just a memoir, not even the mother-daughter part, it was an excellent memoir. I mean, she's an incredible writer and does a great job of grabbing you with stories that you want to keep, compels you to keep reading. And then add that layer of the mother-daughter piece and the fact that she's a therapist, so she's getting that. And I will say, folks like her, and there's some other therapists, like I had a therapist on, a somatic therapist, I want to say February of 2020 on the podcast. I'm blanking on the name. I thought the book was over on my shelf, but it's not. But she and Judy, I think there's really a trend in therapy, in therapists wanting to reveal more of themselves because I think it really strengthens that therapeutic relationship when more, you know, it used to be that the therapist didn't reveal anything about themselves, and that's so detrimental. And she's right. The things that we study are the things that we're trying to figure out in ourselves. And wouldn't we rather know that our therapist is interested in that because they're passionate about it for a reason too, than not? I mean, to me, that's, yeah, I want to go to her, like not, you know, not the person that might be a little more ambivalent about the topic.
I love that she
go ahead.
No, I love that she actually addresses that in the book too. Like, you know, she has certain clients and they actually say to her, thank you for sharing that, because I mean, it's helped them open up some peace.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been to 2 therapists in my life, both excellent, and both excellent because of what you just said. Is because it wasn't, I was able to connect and relate to them because they were giving stuff back to me and I was giving stuff to them. And I mean, it would not have worked if it hadn't. I can't imagine it not doing that.
I think somebody else was trying to say something. Did it? Rebecca, was that you? Or did I see another head? Well, it's not a one-sided relationship, right? Like, it's not. Just like in coaching, it's not a one-sided relationship. Yes, I have boundaries, and no, I'm not a therapist, but it can't just be one-sided. You can't not know things about me, because then you put that person on a pedestal, and that's not a healthy place for anyone to be, right? Among other things.
Right.
I'm glad you said that, because, you know, the coaching program I'm going through, I've got my chops busted more than once by saying, you know, I'll offer something, right? I'll say, may I offer this? And they're like, okay, you don't need to be saying that to the coachee. I'm like, okay. So
it's a dance. It's a dance, Beth. I mean, in a coaching session, it's really important to me that it's all about my client.
Correct. Yes.
And so it is definitely a dance of making sure that you're not bringing everything back to you.
Yes.
And so that is a dance that you do, but it is important for folks.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I'm getting better at, well, most of the time my intention is for a springboard for them as an offering. It's like, here, I've been in this boat before. Yeah.
Any final thoughts before I close this out for the night? Well, I'm so grateful for all of you for being here, for taking part. Y'all are such wonderful humans. And I'm going to send the recording out of this to everyone who has signed up for tonight, so that if there's any piece of it that you want to revisit, that will be available to you. And if you're not in Raw yet, I just another plug. It's super supportive. It's lovely. I highly recommend joining us. And I know, Vivi, yeah, I'm looking at you.
Oh, I know.
I
It's
know.
hard when you had the corporate job.
I know. You could just have us on in the background, right?
No, I just need to quit. That's what I. Oh, it's come so close so many times this year. That's another story.
All right, you lovely ladies. Thank you so much for being here tonight. And I will see you all soon, I hope.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.